Sri Gurubhyo Namaha, Sri Paramagurubhyo Namaha, Srimad Ananda Tirtha Bhagavad Pada Charya Gurubhyo Namaha, Sri Raghavendra Tirtha Gurubhyo Namaha, Harihi Om. We are on the fourth lecture in the series of Bhagavadgita Theory and Practice of Management, a contemporary profile. In the previous lecture, we had covered the concept of Karma Yoga and conflict resolution and an optimum work culture. The argument there was that the entire message of Bhagavad Gita is to preach a work culture to every one of us. Arjuna is the pretext, making Arjuna as the icon of the listener and giving to us, all of us, an advice on what should be the nature of the work culture. That is why it has got universal appeal. That is why it is not just Moksha Shastra and Yoga Shastra, but it is also a discipline pertaining to human behavior, human psychology, human management, thereto managing oneself. As we have seen, the first Adhyaya was Vishada Yoga, and Rayaru defined the origin of Vishada as some misunderstanding. Moha nimittakat shokat yan manodaurbhalyam yasmin sati sarva vyaparopara bhavati saha vishadaha. Even at the cost of repetition, I keep on telling this definition of Vishada because that becomes the foundation for the entire Bhagavad Gita discourse. In the second Adhyaya, he tries to eliminate the sources of moha, that is misunderstanding, wrong conception about Jivatma, Paramatma, wrong conception about Deha falling and causing collapse of the Sukhas, and then telling that Sukha and Dukkha are not due to the contact of the sense organs with the objects alone, but they have to be accompanied by the Abhimana. Then only they become the source for Sukha and Dukkha. And all these things having been removed, sources of misunderstanding, Krishna immediately jumps on Arjuna to say that you give up your shoka, sadness. And then after telling him to give up the sadness, he immediately jumps on to say that you give up your manodaurbhalya, the weakness of your mind. And once you give up the weakness of the mind, you should get ready for performing your duty. That is ultimately the message of Bhagavad Gita. And later on, he says as to how we should be ready to perform our duties in what was described as Nivritta Karmanusthana framework. I am just recapitulating what was done in the last lecture. Nivritta Karmanusthana has got four components. One, performance of the prescribed duties, and second, doing it without obsession about the rewards, and then doing it as Bhagavad Aradhana Buddhi. And once you do it as a task for the welfare of the mankind with robust objective and not with ulterior selfish motives, it becomes very decent and high profile. And then you must also have the feeling that you are not doing it alone. You are doing it for the with the help of the others. So we did it and not I did it. I gave you the example as to how I saw in Japanese industrial culture, people have a tendency to say that we did it, and the CEO, other senior white-collared executives, and the labor and all the levels of people are all dressed in the same dress, and they all share the responsibility of functioning for the task of the corporate sector. And that is, they have imbibed this approach of selflessness in doing the work. And the same thing is stated in Bhagavad-Gita also. Yoga karmasu kaushalam. Yoga is nothing but efficiency in one's own work, and that is. Then the question comes as to what mental modality we should adopt, what kind of mental framework we should have in performing the duties. As I said, there could be two extreme modalities. One modality of not having respect for the others, not having love for the corporate sector, love for the work, and not having any deep interest in the interests of the corporate sector, doing it just like that and taking the salary and enjoying. And the other is doing it with complete commitment, with complete devotion, complete respect for the CEO, complete respect for the elders, complete respect for the system as a whole. And the latter is obviously more appropriate. And performance in the Nivritta Karmanusthana framework ensures us to do the job most efficiently, most effectively. Whereas the person who is engaged in the concerns, in the interests of himself, will not devote himself fully to the tasks on hand. And therefore, Nivritta Karmanusthana framework. So, how do we do that? How we get into that? We should be away from the attractions that comes to the mind. And here I must tell you that Bhagavad-Gita gives a profound universal theory of activity, why things happen as they are. That comes in later in the 17th or the 18th Adhyaya, which says, Sankhye Kritante Proktani Siddhaye Sarva Karmanam Adhishthanam Tatha Karta Karanancha Prithak Vidham Vividhacha Prithak Cheshta Daivancha Ivatra Panchamam Sharira Vangmanobhiryat Karma Prarabhate Naraha Nyayam Va Viparitam Va Panchayite Tasya Hetavaha Tatraivam Sati Kartaram Atmanam Kevalam Tuyaha Pasyatyakrita Buddhitvat Nasa Pasyati Durmati. Very clear statement as to how 5 determinants are there for any activity. Even despite the fact that there are 5 determinants, if someone thinks that he himself is doing, he is Durmati, he is a fool, he is a dirty person, he is a person with very wicked mindset, not accepting the reality. That is how Krishna uses very sharp language to denounce a person who thinks that he himself is responsible and all the benefits should appropriate to him. And that person would not be a person with good buddhimati, good mind. And now what are the 5 factors? Broadly speaking, I will again deal with this later in the course of the lectures. Let us now understand the broad meaning of this theory of activity slokas. Adhishthanam. Adhisthana is essentially initial conditions. Adhishthanam. Tatha karta. First, the performer. The performer is also considered as an important element in the actions. Now, it is not like performer being counted as labor or human resource as in the modern science. In the modern theory of management or economics, the production is done by using the material inputs and the human resource. The human resource is counted in terms of number of units of the labor. 5 engineers, 10 manual workers, 20 managers, and so on. But we don't take into consideration their mental attitudes, whether they are committed to their work or they are doing it only for certain benefits. So we don't take that into consideration. Whereas in the Bhagavad-Gita theory of management or the traditional theory of management, human resource is considered as a factor combined with the psyche, the mental attitudes. That is why the classification is done of the karta, satvika karta, rajasa karta and tamasa karta. And in categorizing these into satvika karta, rajasa karta, tamasa karta, the attitudes, the characteristics, the qualities of the human resource are taken into account. For instance, you produce a doctor. Suppose he has no aptitude to serve the poor in the villages, or he has no aptitude to provide his doctoral services to the needy persons in time, unless they deposit their money. So the attitude is important. He must have the aptitude of serving the mankind with the help of his technical knowledge. And if he does not do that, then he is not to be counted as one doctor. He has to be counted as half the doctor or 1/3 the doctor. So here the counting of labor or workers is not important. Their attitudes are to be taken into account. This is the substantial difference in the approach to the activity analysis as is done in the traditional literature of Bhagavad-Gita, Upanishads and Vedas, and the modern literature where only material aspects are taken. So karta, satvika, I will give the definitions of satvika karta, rajasa karta, tamasa karta later. But it is enough to understand now that for the present lecture, that karta is not uniform, he is not of the same characteristic, he can be differentiated by his attributes and character, the qualities of attitudes. So Mukta Sango Anahamvadi Dhrityutsaha Samanvitaha Siddha Siddhyoho Nirvikaraha Karta Satvika Uchyati. Mukta Sangaha Anahamvadi, the one who does not have attachment that these are mine, and one who does not say that I did it. Dhrityutsaha Samanvitaha, the one who has got the aptitude of courage and enthusiasm, dhriti and utsaha. Siddha siddhyoho nirvikaraha. A satvika karta has to be unaffected, undaunted by situations of success or situations of failure. He should be equanimous. He should not jump around his room when the Sensex index goes up or his profit rate increases, and not feel very depressed and sit in a corner when some small thing goes wrong. Siddha siddhyoho nirvikaraha. Karta satvika uchyate. And see, in this definition of karta, the engineering degree or medical degree or managerial degree or economics degree are not taken into account. His mental attitudes are counted, are described to categorize him as satvika karta. And similarly, rajasa karta and tamasa karta. I will not elaborate those things now, but it is enough to say that karta is very characteristically counted in the traditional theory of activity, in the Bhagavad-Gita theory of activity. Karta, then karanam pratisagvidam. Karanam are the instruments, the objects that are required to conduct an activity. For instance, in a factory, you need the floor level machinery, in computers, you need cars, you need transport sector, all the material, raw material, capital, equipments, all these are again physical dimensions or the material dimensions. But the Bhagavad Gita considers more fundamental karanas for the activity. They are Indriya, Manas and Buddhi. Because unless we take the factors which govern the behavior of the person, The behavior of any person is governed by the three basic organs of the body, the Indriyas, Manas and Buddhi. These are very important aspects of the body, and these interaction between Indriya, Manas and Buddhi, that is the subject of my present lecture. To say that interactions between Manas, Indriya and Buddhi. Again, I am not saying much which may not be known to many of you or may not be logically understood by any of you, but putting it in the framework of a theory or a model of modality, as is done in Bhagavadgita, is important. Then Indriya, Manas and Buddhi. Why do they become the basic determinants of human behavior? That is because Indriyas, the Pancha Jnanendriyas, Pancha Karmendriyas, Pancha Jnanendriyas have the tendency to reach to the Vishayas. Vishayas means the subjects. For instance, for the eyes, Rupa is supposed to be the Vishaya. Then for Ghanendriya, Gandha is, that means the smell is the Vishaya. Then Rasanendriya, Ruchi is the Vishaya. And Karanendriya, Shabda is the Vishaya. Shabda, Rasa, Rupa, Gandha, Sparsha, Rasana, all these, Ruchi. All these are Vishayas. Sparsha, the object to be touched. These are called as Vishayas, subject matter. And so Indriyas go to Vishayas. Then what happens when Indriyas come in contact with Vishayas? They generate certain signals. See the scientific nature of this analysis. A professional modern psychiatrist professor once was sitting in the panel when I was giving lectures in SVBC channel, and she said that such technical, such detailed and systematic analysis is not available even in their modern psychology science, psychiatrist treatments. So here the Indriyas go to the Vishayas, they generate the signals, and those signals come to the mind in the form of thoughts. Those Vishayas come to the mind in the form of thoughts, and they generate thoughts. They generate good thoughts and bad thoughts. To give another example, suppose you see a beautiful object, beautiful girl for that matter. The eyes see a beautiful girl, or the eyes see an erotic scene in a film theater, or on the road while you are coming. The student is returning from the college or the school, and he looks at an erotic scene of a picture on the billboards on the road. Now, this scene would generate certain signals, and they get converted into thoughts. The thoughts could be that he must go and visit that theater and see more details about it, get to go that picture in the night or next weekend, and he must get money for that. He may get into a number of ideas, or he may ignore that. He may say, no, my examinations are important, they are very close by, and I should not go. And in the case of seeing a beautiful girl, you may ignore the whole sight, or you may nourish the idea, why do I not go near her, talk to her, touch her? All nasty ideas may come. Early wicked thoughts and good thoughts, both the thoughts come. Kichaka nourished the idea of doing overboard to Draupadi, and he got into trouble. Like that, the Duryodhana, Dushasana nourished the idea of insulting Draupadi and did the nasty thing in the Sabhagraha. So dirty ideas may come or good ideas may come. and the mind becomes the battlefield. Kurukshetra is not in Haryana, but it becomes in the mind itself. So the signals get converted into thoughts, and the thoughts get converted into emotions. The emotions of love, hatred, affection, jealousy, a number of emotions, the bhavanas, they come after the thoughts are absorbed in the mind, and the battle begins. And then there would be a tendency for certain emotions to overpower the other emotions. And then the emotions lead one to the actions. If you have an attitude of being ethical and not caring for the emotion of love and hatred or nasty ideas, you may ignore the whole thing. So the actions would depend upon the nature of the emotions and which kind of emotions become more prominent at a particular moment. That is why the student may give up the idea of going to the picture and wasting his time, but he may decide to sit down at home and go to his friend's place or work together for the studies. I have written a book on Bhagavadgita and the mind, giving the example of a student throughout the book as to how the different stages of the behavior are governed by the certain principles laid down in Bhagavad Gita. And it has come out very beautifully, so to say, to describe as to how life, man's behavior is governed by the contact of the sense organs with the objects. I am elaborating on this, though it is a known fact. So then, karanancha prathagvidham. So Indriya, Manas and Buddhi. And Buddhi is supposed to give the reasoning. When Arjuna was found to be ignoring the compulsions of performance of his duty, and after the moha is removed, first thing Krishna tells him that his power of reasoning, Arjuna's power of reasoning, has been corrupted. He rebukes him. Yada te moha kalilam buddhirvyatitarishyati tada gantasi nirvedam srotavyasya srutasya cha. Yada te moha kalilam buddhihi. Buddhihi moha kalilam vyatitarishyati. Moha is a kalila. It's a dirty daldal. When your buddhi crosses across this daldal of misunderstanding, then tada gantasi nirvedam srotavyasya srutasya cha. Because his buddhi, power of reasoning, was corrupted, it did not advise him that all his other arguments are futile, but he must focus on the performance of the duty, and he would have ignored all his other logical arguments that people will die, ladies will become alone, dharma will be destroyed, the kulas will be destroyed. That is why I will not like to fight. He chose the path of not doing his duty. So that is the message of from the Arjuna's behavior in the first canto. And now in the same way, in many situations, the manager, instead of doing his duty, may dabble with many other things which are not concerned with his duties. So yadate mohakalilam buddhirvyatitarishyati tada gantasi nirvedam srotavyasya srutasya cha. Then you will be able to understand whatever was heard by you earlier, whatever was studied by you, whatever was told to you, and then whatever I am going to tell you, all those you will be able to understand only when your buddhi has been pure, has been purified, the kalila has been culled out of your buddhi. So kalila could be in the manas, in the indriyas, and in the buddhi. To tell you as to how all these three interact and how you may get destroyed, the Bhagavad Gita gives in two basic slokas in the second adhyaya. Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsahan Sangaste Shupajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kamahan Kamat Krodho Vijayate Krodhat Bhavati Sammohaha Sammoha Smriti Vibhramahan Smriti Bhramshad Buddhinasho Buddhinashad Pranashyati. The two slokas give us the basic factors responsible for our destruction and our behavior becoming unethical. What happens? Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha. When the Indriyas have come in contact with Vishaya, and you will not give up that contact, that you will ruminate over it. The boy sees the posters and comes home, starts thinking, and you hear a news on the television and you start ruminating over it. Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha. I give the example of a lady going to the jewelry shop along with other friend ladies, and there she sees a beautiful charming garland or necklace or ring, etc., an ornament, and her friend had come to the jewelry shop to purchase jewelry for the marriage of her daughter, but this lady was accompanying her, and she had nothing to do to purchase this. She has to ignore her interest in the ornaments. But after coming home, she starts ruminating over it. What a beautiful garland it was, what a beautiful necklace it was, what a beautiful ring it was, and keeps on ruminating. In the night, she dreams of the same thing. And dhyayataha. Dhyayataha means ruminating over it. Vishayan Pumsaha. And once she keeps on repeating that experience of seeing the ornaments, it generates a sangha, an attachment. Oh, I must try to possess that. I must make that ornament mine. A number of emotions, thoughts come, emotions come. Sangaste shupajayate. Sangat sanjayate kamaha. And after that, a desire develops to possess it. And then once the desire gets up in the mind, then you start, the emotions will again grow up, and you start thinking ways and means of possessing it. You need money, how to borrow the money, how to tell a lie to the husband, or how to take a loan from the bank, or how to steal the money from the husband's wallets, and so on and so forth. There could be 100 ways of dubious methods of fulfilling the desire. And if that cannot happen, Kramat Krodho Vijayate. Now, it may appear this analysis to be simplistic, but it is so basic and so fundamental for determining our behavior. Kamat Krodho Vijayate. And once the anger comes, Krodhat Bhavati Sammoha. Krodha leads to sammoha. Sammoha means misunderstanding. So, krodhat bhavati sammoha, a wrong conception. Sammoha smriti vibhramaha. Once, at that moment, if you had remembered, no, I should not really take it. My mother had told me that there is no need for purchasing any new necklace. I would have given up. But all that gets forgotten. Sammohat smriti vibhramaha. You will forget about the good words of advice given by the elders or by the ethical books and by the Dasa, Haridasa songs and so on. All that becomes only for show, not for action. Smriti vibhramaha. Smriti bhramshad buddhinashaha. Once you forget about the lessons on ethics, morality, the right things to do, then the evil thoughts, evil emotions take over you, and buddhi also gets corrupted. And buddhi fails to give the proper reasoning to be on the right side. Buddhinashat pranasyati. See, this again is a typical example of the interaction between the Indriyas, Manas and Buddhi as the basic determinants of human behavior. Though I have given you the example of a lady going to the jeweler's shop, you can multiply the examples with a number of other situations where the contact of the sense organs with the objects generates an attachment in the object, and you start ruminating over it, and you start thinking about it, and you develop a kama, a desire, and then if kama does not get fully fulfilled, you get anger, and anger generates misunderstanding, further misunderstanding, and then that again generates the buddhinasha, and with buddhinasha you get destroyed. I am reminded of a beautiful allegory of this entire journey of the body, journey of the human being in many situations in life. The allegory is given in Kathopanishad and also is repeated here in Bhagavadgita later. Allegory is very beautiful. It says that the human body is like a chariot. Atmanam rathinam vidhi shariram rathamevacha. This sharira itself is the chariot in which Atma is sitting as the Yajamana. The Jivatma is sitting as the Yajamana. And then Indriyani hayanahu, the Pancha Jnanendriyas in particular, Pancha Karmendriyas also, together 10 horses. They are the horses. And what does the horse do? It drags the chariot in the directions in which it wants. And there is a saying in Kannada, Yattu erege elitu, Kona kerege elitu, or emme kerege elitu anta. That means if there are different horses with different aptitudes, they drag you into different directions. And how can the ratha move smoothly when the horses drag you in different directions? No. So the ratha's horses will have to be managed properly. And now the further allegory says that manah pragrahamevacha. This mind is like the rain, R-E-I-N, rain, is like rain. So manah pragrahamevacha. Then indriyani hayanahu manah pragrahamevacha. And then who is the person who controls, who has to keep the reins in the hand? That is buddhi. It's a beautiful allegory. In Kathopanishad, in the Yamanachiketa Samvada, this allegory is given. And buddhim to sarathim vidhi. And the Yajamana is sitting in the chariot, owning all these. He is the owner of the buddhi, he is the owner of the Indriyas, he is the owner of the mind. But buddhi will have to direct the different horses by using the reins. If it does not do that, if it allows the horses to move where and the mind to go wherever the mind, the Indriyas go, then he will be destroyed. That is again described in Bhagavadgita in the following sloka. Indriyanam hi charatam yanmano anuvidhiyate tadasya harati prajnam vayurnavamivambhasi. One thing I would like to mention, that Krishna Paramatma is fond of imageries, allegories. A number of allegories come. In fact, one can write a PhD thesis on the allegories in Bhagavad Gita, imageries. And they convey the messages so characteristically, so picturesquely, that you don't need to have any commentaries. And here it is said that if the mind also falls in line with the Indriyas moving in different directions, Indriyanam hi charatam, Indriyas going in different directions, and then if Manas also goes in the same directions, and then Tadasya Harati Prajnam, that really takes away the Buddhi also in the same direction. Vayuhu Navam Iva Ambhasi, how a boat moving in the midst of the water in a river or in an ocean, when the wind comes, when the wind blows, when a hurricane comes, then that hurricane makes the boat toss here and there, and then finally makes it submerge, and all the people, all the objects in the boat get destroyed. And this happens basically because the mind goes wherever the Indriyas go, and once this happens, the buddhi also gets lost. Vayurnavamivambasi, prajna also goes in the same direction, and all the three together will ultimately destroy the boat of this body, the boat of this sharira. So human body gets destroyed when we do not keep the sense organs, the mind and the intellect in proper combination, in proper shape, in proper interactive mode. Therefore, it is important that buddhi should be allowed to develop in proper directions. Mind and indriyas should be controlled only when person would behave properly. That is why he says, tasmadyasya mahabaho nigrihitani sarvashah indriyani indriyarthebhyah tasya prajna pratisthita. That is why the one who controls all these three, and in particular indriyas from the objects of the indriyas. You don't allow the indriyas to move towards the objects, and then the matter ends. Why do you want? Sometimes later he says, all this source for disturbance is outside you. The Vishayas are outside you. Why do you want to get caught up in the midst of various forces when Vishayas are outside you? So you can control them by controlling from outside. And this kind of beautiful, humorous statement comes later on in Bhagavadgita. And ultimately, the prajna, the buddhi becomes balanced only when you keep the indriyas away from the disturbing objects, and only when you keep indriyas and manas under your control. And then you get proper balance, proper pleasure. And there is a beautiful principle for keeping your intellect in proper shape, which says, ragadvesha viyuktaistu vishayan indriyaicharan atmavasyair vidhe atman prasadam adhigacchati. A person who keeps the objects of the objects of the indriyas without raga and dvesha. Why the contact between the indriyas and the objects become a disturbing factor? Because the contact between the indriyas and the objects have a tendency to generate many disturbing forces. Kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsara. These are generated as a result of the contact of the indriyas with the sense organs in the mind, and the mind becomes the battlefield. Mind is only a storehouse of thoughts, signals and emotions and so on. Mind does not play the role of deciding. It is the Atma who has to do it by controlling it, Buddhi which has to do it by managing it. Atmavasyahi, if they are under the control of the individual Atma, Jivatma, then Atmavasyahi vidhe Atma, Atmavasyahi vidhe Atma prasadam adhigacchati. Then he gets a certain disposition of coolness, of happiness, of composure, of balance. He does not get disturbed. Then ultimately, a sloka which I repeat many times to those who come to me to say that they are disturbed and they are not able to do anything, I say, you reflect upon the following sloka. Prasade sarva dukkhanam hanirashyopajayate prasanna chetaso hyashu buddhi paryavatishthati. If your intellect has to function properly, and if it has to present the proper reasoning, intellect is a stock concept. Buddhi is a stock concept. The flows coming from this stock are the arguments, the reasoning power. So intellect has to be properly stored. It has to be. That is why you listen to earlier, there used to be stories told by elders, the Puranas, which tell you the various ethical principles of life, and I told about this in the very first lecture as to how Dhruva and Suniti and Suruchi and Uttama talk about the lifestyles. Uttama Dhruva and Uttama Suruchi, Dhruva Suniti. Firm commitment to moral principles is the lifestyle of Dhruva Suniti, and a complete surrender to the worldly pleasures, to have them in the best possible manner, is Uttama Suruchi. So the conflict between these two lifestyles has to be settled by making the commitment to values and principles be superior. Ultimately that happens. So many of the Puranic stories, the names are also very important. I told also the Prahlada and Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu means, Hiranya means gold, Kashipu means pillow. That fellow wanted even his pillow to be made from gold. That means he was so much materialistic. Hiranyakashipu stands for the materialistic excessiveness, as we are now today. The materialistic excesses leading to excessive consumerism, craze for more and more, not ever satisfied, not always getting the balance or the composure of mind. Then obviously a person who is undaunted by these materialistic forces, a person who is always having the faith in the power of excellence, the power of Paramatma we call, but Paramatma is standing for the icon of ethics, morality, all good attributes. So the person who is committed the principles of morality and good principles, good ethics and perfection in everything, he would always conquer, and he would does not get affected. Even if the ferocious Narasimha came, Prahlada was undaunted. All the devatas say that he has taken birth for you. Prahlada was showing as daunted, but he was the one who could go to Narasimha, who could please him, who could appease to him, because he had faith in the principles of ethics, perfection, most efficient situation. I will convert these into lessons for our everyday life later, but obviously if we take Paramatma as an icon of excellence, icon of perfection, you will understand as to why everywhere there is an urge to recognize Paramatma, accept him as your ultimate goal, because we want ultimate perfection, ultimate efficiency to be the guiding principles for our behavior. As I said in my lecture, there is a Bhagavan who is an icon of perfection. I must aim at reaching towards him with sincerity, with complete commitment, complete devotion. And once I deliver a very profound lecture, I can say that I have achieved moksha. I have come near God. So all these are allegories, are names given to you to understand certain principles of life. And see, the Vaikuntha and Swarga, Naraka, they are all here in this very life. Naraka means what? Naraha Kuchita Naraha. That means the person who becomes condemned, he gets Naraka. The unhappiness of being discarded by everyone, put in the jail or suspended or dismissed or totally losing the power, he gets into Naraka. He becomes a rejected person. Swarga means Swaha Gamayati. Swaha means Sukha. There is a colony of people who live in Swarga. They are always having the prasada, composure of mind. They are always having control over their sense organs and mind. Of course, they also misbehave, the gods also misbehave, and when they misbehave with ahankara, with vanity, and with kama, krodha, then they are also punished. They are not perfection. As long as they are behaving within the framework of ethics and morality and good principles, they become gods. Otherwise, they are rejected and condemned as unacceptable beings. So in this manner, the Swarga, Naraka, Vaikuntha, and ultimate Bhagavan, they are all here in this very life. Anyway, Naraka means becoming a condemned man. Swarga means going to a colony or a society where all happy people live, and you also do not have the kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsara, or get them reduced. So therefore prasada, prasade sarva dukkhanam hanirasyopajaayate, and prasanna chetaso hyashu buddhi parvatishthati. And like this, the emphasis is on having proper combination of Indriya, Manas and Buddhi. Only when you have the interaction between Indriya, Manas and Buddhi in the proper shape, you will be able to behave properly. Now then your habit of doing your karmas in the Nivritta Karmanusthana framework becomes a permanent characteristic for you. You will not deviate. Once you have the mind, sense organs and the intellect properly balanced. That is why Dhyana Yoga. Karma Yoga is supposed to be Bahiranga Sadhana and Dhyana Yoga is supposed to be Antaranga Sadhana. Only when you have the Antaranga Sadhana practiced by you, by properly keeping the mind, the sense organs and the intellect in proper combination, that you will get into the habit of performing your duties in the Nivritta Karmanusthana framework, which ultimately is the goal of message of Bhagavadgita. To every one of us, do your prescribed duties wherever you are. It's not necessarily Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Wherever you are in the office, you are in the bank, you are in the teaching profession, you are the manager, you are at home. Even the housewife has got a certain prescribed duties. The husband in the house, the owner of the house has got certain duties, and each one should perform the respective duties in the proper shape. Then only the life would be free from stress. The stress is what? The mismatch between expectations and events is the cause for stress. So many times for dealing with stress, they prescribe medicines for sleep, they prescribe yoga, Vishayas and so on. And in the 6th canto, Dhyana Yoga is prescribed to be practiced every day, and then only it leads one to a happy, harmonious existence. We'll stop here. Yatra Yogeshwarah Krishno, Yatra Partho Dhanurdharaha, Tatra Sri Vijayo Bhutihi, Dhruvani Tirmatir Mama, Sri Krishna Arpanamastu.